Welcome to My Guitar Breakthrough with Chris Buck. I am Matt Ferguson, the Director of Artist and Influencer Marketing with Yamaha Guitars. And welcome. Welcome, Chris. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm going to get rid of myself on my laptop next to the phone because that is scaring the life out of me having to look at my own face. So,
To Chris Buck.
oh man, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Let's jump right in and why don't you share with us like how you got connected with Yamaha guitars?
It was a back alley and a briefcase full of money, and away we went. No, it was rewind. Probably, funny enough, the start of my relationship with Yamaha probably goes back to the inception of Cardinal Black, my band, back to about 2010. Had an email from Mark Kirkland, artist relations here in the UK, getting in touch, just saying, do you want to check out this new Pacifica that Yamaha were kind of trying at the time? It was a P90 version, and at the time I was very much kind of like a traditional single coil guy. That was kind of what I was going through, the phase I was in. He brought it down to a show that we were doing at the Troubadour in London, in Earl's Court. Tried it out, really liked it. Didn't particularly kind of think it was my thing at the time, at least with the band. But we kind of, I think, actually, my enduring memory of that is managing to snap 2 strings on it during sound check, which I think is more testament to my heavy-handedness as much as anything else. But the 4 strings that were on it sounded great. Yeah, kind of, we kind of kept this relationship going, albeit in the background for a few years. And then it was just after the launch of the Revstar, actually. I was in a guitar shop in Cardiff, capital of Wales, for anyone not from this neck of the woods. And saw the Revstars hanging on the wall. I think it was a couple of months after they'd been launched. And just my initial, as much as guitarists, we all kind of tend to kid ourselves that playability and tone and all the kind of rest of the stuff is what attracts us to a guitar, is the ultimate kind of deciding factor. I think first and foremost, it has to look cool. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. And that was the first thing that caught my attention about the Revstar was there's something that looks different. There's not something that's trying to be a Les Paul or a Strat or a Tele or some derivation of a classic design. And plugged it in, played it, liked the fact that there were P90s and humbucker versions available as well. Obviously, the initial run had the one with the Bigsby as well. So there was this kind of quite this cool, eclectic array of options. I just really loved it, fell in love with it and got in touch with Mark, and it kind of blossomed from there. So it's just been this thing that, my old man bought an SG 2000 years ago, which is the heaviest object in existence, but sounds absolutely incredible. I think it's probably still sustaining from the last time I played a chord on it, having been sat in the case for the last couple of months. It's just one of those great guitars, So Yamaha's always been this kind of name in the back of my mind that's a great guitar manufacturer. So upon trying the Revstar then and just really liking it and falling in love with that, it was just a relationship which made sense.
Awesome. So did your dad have that guitar before you played a Revstar?
Oh yeah, that would have been a long time prior to that. I think he'd read about Santana's use of Yamaha guitars at various points in his career and all of the other guys that have used them. And there was a guitar shop in Cheltenham, relatively local to where I live or where I grew up, that just was my favourite type of guitar shop. It's called World of Guitars, where you never knew what you were going to find in there from one week to the next. It was pretty much exclusively second-hand stuff for the most part, but just this constant kind of revolving door of interest in stuff, from really kind of like entry-level second-hand Squires for 70 quid up to, Les Paul Customs or like Yamaha SG 2000 or 1000s, or just constant interest in kind of like, thoroughfare of stuff coming through. And just came across it in that shop, World of Guitars, and again just fell in love with it, and wasn't really quite aware of how heavy it was at the time, to be honest. Didn't have that much experience with guitars, and it's only in later years then I've realised that it's a good old lump, as they say. But it's an incredible guitar nonetheless. But yeah, that comfortably predates any affiliation with Yamaha easily.
So Yamaha's been around kind of since before you were even playing electric guitars in your world.
Oh yeah, there was a Yamaha acoustic as well around the house when I was a kid. So my old man doesn't really play guitar. He knows 4 chords, 2 of which are exactly the same chord but played with different fingers. I don't like to tell him that, but he's always been intrigued with them as kind of pieces of art. I'm back at his house for this interview, and you can see the Beatles stuff over my shoulder. He's a big music fan, big Beatles fan, big Stones fan, big Dylan fan, insert all the kind of classic stuff here. That was my musical upbringing, was very much inspired by his musical tastes. And he was a little bit of a frustrated guitar player, I guess. So there were always a couple of guitars knocking around the house. There was a USA Strat, I remember, that was in its case behind the sofa in the living room, and that was only kind of brought out on special occasions. Kind of like, oh, can I see that again? And we dig that out. But there was a Squier Strat knocking around that was constantly on a stand, and there was also this Yamaha acoustic. So as long as I can remember, there's not only been guitars around, there's always been a Yamaha around, so it's I guess on some, not that particularly factored into my thinking, to be honest, with a Revstar, I guess, but on some subconscious level, I guess it did plant the seed very early on that it wasn't just Gibson, it wasn't just Fender, it wasn't just the kind of the ones that roll off your tongue immediately. I guess it's Yamaha has always been very much there.
Nice, that's cool. I had no idea that you guys had an old SG.
Yeah, it's a great guitar.
So, the title of this live stream is My Guitar Breakthrough. So we're asking everybody who comes on here to share a breakthrough in their world, related to their guitar playing. So I'm wondering if you have like a particular one you'd like to highlight and kind of share with the audience.
I think I'm yet to have one, to be honest. I'm still waiting for it. No, it's funny. I was thinking about it earlier, trying to give a little bit of forethought to it, and I've not had many kind of eureka moments, I guess. I think the first undoubted moment of just feeling like I'd unlocked something was the power chord. I remember my guitar teacher in school showing me that. I had a guitar teacher for a fairly brief amount of time. It was, I've made the joke before, but it literally did start because I realised guitar lessons coincided with maths lessons. So I thought, well, if I start playing guitar, I can get on math for a bit. And he showed me the power chord, and that kind of unlocked a couple of things in my mind in terms of like, oh, that smells like Teen Spirit. That, at the time I was a big punk rock fan of, kind of like The Offspring and Blink-182, all of the stuff that you listen to in your adolescence. And once I had this idea of a power chord in my head, it was like, oh, cool, that's all of this stuff, and away we go. But in later playing, I guess, or my later life, I think, again, it was relatively early on. Like I said, I've not had many kind of eureka moments as such, but I remember watching Guns N' Roses live at the Tokyo Dome in 1992, I think it would have been. Obviously not there in person. I would have been about 6 months old at that point. But the DVD, the Use Your Illusions DVD that came out, and watching Slash play, it would have been the end of Rocket Queen. And it kind of transitions between major and minor. And up until this point, all I knew was pretty much exclusively minor pentatonic, because why on earth would you need to know anything else? Still about 99% of stuff I do, to be honest. But watching him play the end of Rocket Queen, which, like I said, transitions between major and minor. And up until this point, I knew the major scale, but it was this slightly clunky, slightly awkward shape that wasn't particularly natural under the fingers. Especially relative to the minor pentatonic, which is very simple and very intuitive to play. I remember watching Slash and thinking, well, he seems to be playing in a major scale or a major key, or a major context, but with the ease and fluency of a minor shape. And also he seems to just be playing in a minor shape. So I went away, did a little bit of research, a little bit of Googling or whatever it was, I can't really remember, and came to the conclusion that he was playing the major pentatonic scale, which is obviously a kind of, in essence, a truncated version of the full major scale, but played in that same position. And if you move it up 3, then you're suddenly in major land. So that was this huge moment in terms of joining the dots and then suddenly not just trying to exclusively shoehorn minor pentatonic scales or minor pentatonic solos into songs in a major key. But outside of that, I think it's, my entire development as a guitar player has been fairly incremental. It's been something which just constantly evolves. There are not many moments, and probably, easily to my detriment, I don't study guitar anywhere near as much as I should do. I don't practice as much as I should do. I noticed when I put the call out for questions earlier, that was one consistent kind of theme was, what would you advise in regard to a practice schedule? And what's your thinking in that respect? And honestly, I've never had one. It's just been, I've always loved guitar and I've always wanted to do nothing other than play guitar since the moment I found it, which was pretty much dangerously close to doing all of my major exams in school, much to my parents' vexation. But it's just been this thing that I've loved from a very early point. So my development as a guitar player has been pretty much purely through having spent all of my waking hours with the guitar in my hand. So it's not been a practice schedule, it's not been a rehearsal schedule so much as just this incremental development over the years. And I guess as such, there aren't likely or aren't so much likely to be those that now makes sense moments, because it's just a incremental thing. It's just something which naturally develops and naturally evolves.
Yeah, I feel like that, sometimes there's guitar players, and I think that you would probably fall into this category where um, you have a fair amount of technical proficiency and skill. But it seems like the thing, and just this is just what I've seen over the years, as you kind of evolved as a player, is your playing is not so much practice, but you're finding your own voice.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I think that that's a really important thing for guitar players to strive for, to kind of find your own voice. I think everybody has one, and
Yeah.
some people might get to it sooner than others. But I think that's really what kind of draws people to certain players, is that there's a thing that happens when you hear guitar player X and it's them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in my opinion, you have that.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. It's like I said, there is a big focus on that, and rightly so, I guess, to a degree. I think the thing that always frustrates me slightly in that respect is that social media has bred this idea of, well, everyone now suddenly has access to an Instagram page or a YouTube channel or whatever it is, all of these different mediums of getting out there. And possibly at moments in your career or in the kind of the arc of your trajectory of a player, moments when you probably aren't fully developed enough to be exposed to the wider world. I think back to some of the stuff that I first uploaded to YouTube when I was a kid, when I was 16, 17, and I have absolutely no qualms about saying that I was just mini Slash at that point. That was very much, Slash was my idol in every respect, in a kind of musical respect, in a kind of fashion sense, in everything about Slash was just something that I idolized. And looking back, there's videos of me which thankfully are no longer floating about the internet, which are just kind of Slash but about a foot shorter, because I was 16 in my bedroom in South Wales. And I think that's the shame of reading a lot of comments on social media. You see a lot of incredible young guitar players who get nothing but abuse for the fact that, oh, it's just Stevie Ray, or it's just Slash, or it's just John Mayer, or it's just Clapton. Is whoever their idol is. It's very much, you go through that phase of having to kind of find your feet, find your voice, and find what it is about that is unique about your playing, which you can then translate to the world. And ultimately, you only really find your true voice, or your voice as a guitar player or as a musician, through trying and failing to sound like other people. I was reading a quote, and I can't remember the life of me, remember who it was now, but it was about Greta Van Fleet, who, for my money, are an incredible band. Obviously, have blown up massively in the past couple of years, and had an incredible amount of kind of shade, for want of a better phrase, thrown their way initially. Of course, it was that infamous Pitchfork review, which really kind of laid into them, and the comparison to Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. And you look at their age when they released that album, and they were barely out of their teens, And I think it is that development, and it's that just evolution as a player and as a person that happens over a stretch of time, where you do find your voice and you find what is unique about your playing, and you tap into that and kind of exploit that a little bit more. But it's a shame, because I think that's an ongoing evolution, that's an ongoing process. If there is anything unique or identifiable about my playing, that's amazing. It's not something I set out to achieve per se. It's just something which I guess has happened over the years, and the more that I've played, I've done innumerable gigs. I've been out gigging, since I was 15, I guess, playing local pubs, local, whatever, function gigs, kind of weddings. We'd celebrate any religion for the right price. We weren't picky, it was just a gig, and it was just money at the end of the day. So I've been gigging, pretty much all of my adult life, and a lot of my kind of in my childhood years as well, I guess. And it's just a constant evolution. It's just something that happens. But yeah, I think there's an unfair kind of pressure on people to find your voice, sound like you. You just sound like a Stevie Ray ripoff. It's like, well, of course you do. You're 14, you're 15, it's inevitable. So yeah, it's a shame. But like I said, I think you only find your true voice through trying and failing to sound like your heroes. For me, that was obviously Slash, that was Clapton, that was Hendrix a little bit later on. All of the kind of usual suspects, I guess, in a lot of ways. But, I guess if there is anything unique about my playing, it's something I get asked about a lot is that kind of slightly kind of vocal quality, I guess. And a lot of that is from me having listened to a lot of soul music growing up. My mother was a big kind of Motown fan. My dad introduced me to the likes of Sam Cooke and Otis Redding and Aretha Franklin. My grandfather turning me on like Frank Sinatra. I remember my grandfather sitting me down and saying, listen to Frank Sinatra, listen to his phrasing. Same with like Nat King Cole. I remember him playing me Nat King Cole going, listen to his phrasing. I was like, what's phrasing? I guess I was probably 10, 11 at this point. I was like, what's phrasing? He's like, it's the way he's delivering the words. I was like, well, surely, what does that mean? You can just sing the words. They're words. You can only sing them in one way, surely. He's like, no, listen to the way in which he sings them. That's the kind of phrasing. That's the key element that makes him so unique. That's what gives you your voice, quite literally. And it took a while for me to get my head around that. But I guess if there is anything unique or kind of identifiable about my playing, it's that trying to infuse that sort of vocal fluidity and freedom, through slidey, bendy stuff or whatever people like to refer to it as.
Yeah, and also I think the way that you kind of have this hybrid technique where sometimes you're using your fingers, sometimes you're using a pick. It looks to me, and you can maybe verify that this is my one question as we segue into the question portion of the live stream, is, it looks like it's just this subconscious thing that you're not even thinking about at all. Like,
yeah, totally.
So fluid. Is that me trying to think that you've transcended to some other plane, or is it a very calculated and thought out thing of you kind of alternate between those two?
It would have been initially, undoubtedly. I think the kind of transition into starting to use my fingers was incredibly clunky to start off with. It has to be forced, I guess, initially, because it's not something that I was used to doing. It came about, again, it wasn't a particularly kind of concerted effort so much as just sat in front of the TV watching nonsense, kind of happily noodling away on my guitar. I'm thinking, let's give this a go with my fingers. Let's see how dexterous I can be. I had a guitar teacher for a very brief period of time who tried to get me into the idea of like flamenco playing and, finger a string and all that kind of stuff. And I've just, in no way, shape or form, as long as I have as many orifices in my body as I do, I don't have the dexterity for that. That's not something I'm ever going to be any good at. But I guess it did subconsciously plant this idea of like, well, your fingers are there as well. You don't have just to exclusively use a piece of plastic. So that crept into my playing over time, and it would have been very clunky. It would have been a forced, concerted effort, at least to start off with. But by this point, at this point in time, I've been doing that probably for the better part of 10 years. And it is just very much a subconscious process as to kind of trying to coax different sounds out of the string, ultimately. There's an immediacy and an attack and an edge to a piece of plastic like a plectrum, that you don't get with your fingers. But if you want to get that with your fingers, you've got your nail, which is of a similar kind of texture and consistency, I guess, to a piece of plastic. But you've also got the tip of your finger, which is very fleshy. You've got myriad different sounds within just the tips of your fingers, which I think it's helpful to try and exploit that to some degree. So yeah, at this point, it is very much a subconscious thought process, but at least to start off with, to try and give people hope, I guess it was clunky. It involved a lot of dropping of picks, and it involved, a lot of kind of looking like, what the hell is he doing? Why is he doing it, more to the point?
I don't think I've ever seen you drop a pick, and that's actually one of the things that popped into my mind when I started noticing how much you would alternate between the two.
Yeah.
Because personally, I don't know if I could do it once without dropping it.
It happens. This, funny enough, in the solo for Warm Love, in the live session we did for a track called Warm Love, Cardinal Black, it's on YouTube if anyone wants to check that out. The guitar solo in that, you can see me drop the plectrum, pick. I get grief off people on your side of the pond for calling it a plectrum. Yeah, you can see me drop that, and it couldn't have been more perfectly timed if it was tried, because the cameraman couldn't have been physically any closer to my hand when it happened, which initiated a lot of questions as to whether it was planned or staged. But needless to say, if I could do that, I would be working in choreography, not in music. So
very cool. So we have so many questions from all over.
Oh, cool.
Instagram and Facebook and stuff. So I know we've got, about 10 minutes left on the live stream. So you and I kind of, we went through the questions and we picked a couple that were kind of, there was a bunch of them that were a lot of people asking a similar question. So the first one I'm going to start off with is, if you could choose a present or past artist guitar, um, which would you like to own or even play? So this is like any artist. This is somebody from
Yeah.
years ago or somebody from yesterday.
I think the guitar that probably Slash's Appetite Burst, the Chris Derrick replica, I think would probably be up there. I mean, that's, I guess, not beyond the realms of possibility getting to play that at some point, which would be cool. But I think the one that holds the most intrigue, I think, for me, primarily for the fact that it's been missing for however many years now, is the Beano Burst, the Les Paul on John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. Just that tone for me was outside of breakthrough moments in terms of learning to play guitar. That was one of those moments of like, that is the best sound I've ever heard. What is that? What am I listening to? And, that would have happened long before I'd actually even entertained the idea of actually playing a guitar. I remember hearing that and just being totally blown away by it. And in the years that I've kind of researched that since, what he was using and stuff, it's obviously one of the first high profiles of this idea of running this thing called a Les Paul into a thing called a Marshall, and all of the stuff that's inspired in the years gone, years that have preceded that or gone since. So that would be very cool. Obviously, that's been missing since probably the late 60s. Nobody really knows what it was, whether it was 59 or whether it was the 60s. So if I could ever track that down and actually play that, that would be cool. I know Bonamassa made some reference a couple of years ago to knowing where that is, but then very quickly backtracked.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is a good question. Will an instrumental album of yours ever come out?
Do you know what? I've given a bit of thought to that, and I would never say no. I guess bizarrely for someone that has only ever wanted to be in a band, like Cardinal Black or like Buck and Evans or whatever, I do a fair amount of instrumental stuff for YouTube just because it's easier and it's faster to be able to throw together a track, play a bit of guitar on top of it, film myself doing it, mix it, and away you go. It's on YouTube, rather than getting top line, getting melody, getting lyrics, etc., etc. So I guess a lot of people know me primarily for instrumental music, but that's not really something I ever set out to do. It's just a byproduct of having done a fair amount of YouTube content over the years. I would never say no. I think listening to guys who have made incredible careers out of that, whether it's Satriani, whether it's Steve Vai, insert instrumental guitar player here, I'm in no way, shape or form even vaguely comparable to any of those. And there's a kind of a variety in their playing, I guess, which is very much geared towards making guitar orientated music in that respect. For me, it's always been about playing guitar for songs with singing in them, I guess, ultimately. Yes, maybe at some point I would want to do something a little bit different, I guess, though, than just trying to make an instrumental guitar album, because I think it would pale in comparison to any of the great guitar albums that have come before. Like Surfing with the Alien was a big one for me as a kid. When I started getting into guitar, someone turned me on to that, and that's one of the few instrumental guitar albums that I've ever been like truly hooked on. But this, Joe Satriani says so much in his playing that I don't think I'm even vaguely comparable on any level. So maybe keep it for the guys who know what they're doing. But at the same time, I know there's a lot of people who would like something like that from me. So never say never.
Yeah, Joe's definitely, he's one of those players that's very lyrical too, right?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. It kind of unfairly for me gets lumped in with a lot of kind of quote unquote shredders. Because I think Joe is incredibly lyrical, and there's an insane amount of melody in his tracks. They are pieces of music. They're not just excuses for guitar solos. Which is if I was ever to do it, that would be the kind of mantra.
All right. This is a question for you about Cardinal Black. They're asking, do you write the music and then Tom writes the lyrics? Like, how does the songs come together in that band?
I do it all. I do everything. No, it's very much a kind of collaborative effort. It always has been. So the Cardinal Black dates back to the Tom Hollis trio, which was the kind of first incarnation of that band back in about 2009, 2010. Pardon me. I'm aware that sticking my hand over my mouth. There's absolutely nothing when the microphone is also next to my mouth. And even with that kind of iteration of the band, it was always very much an idea of, well, Tom would bring something in and we would work on it, or I would bring something in. It would always be would be like the kind of the nucleus of the idea would be brought in, and then we would kind of elucidate or elaborate on that from there. Tom pretty much always writes the lyrics, but the musical ideas can come from anywhere, really.
All right.
And me.
This is a good question.
Hmm.
What is going through your head when you are soloing?
What's for tea? No, honestly, not a lot, and that's not to kind of say I'm on a higher plane or I've kind of transcended my physical being or any kind of nonsense like that. It's just I remember reading something years ago that Hendrix, is it called like synesthesia or something? I think Hendrix was kind of quoted at some point as saying that he sees music as colors.
Mhm.
So it's this kind of slightly kind of, I don't know, out there idea of interpreting things in a different way. I wouldn't go so far as to say I have that or I kind of think about music in that respect, but it's strange because I always say when people ask me that, where does your lead playing come from? What are you doing? Are you playing licks? I noticed that was another frequent question that came in was, am I relying on stock licks? Am I relying on whatever? I wouldn't say I rely on stock licks. Undoubtedly, there are commonalities and kind of like frequently occurring ideas in my playing. I think I'm only human, but I think I rely more on kind of like stock melodies, I guess, stuff that notes that work particularly well in a certain kind of progression or whatever, or kind of a sequence. That's what I'm thinking about, is trying to follow the melody, which is strange, I guess, because it's not as though I'm hearing the melody in advance of what I'm playing and then trying to follow that. Because I guess that would be a bit of a nightmare if you're hearing stuff in advance of you trying to play it. I don't know is the short answer, I guess. It's a waffly way of getting around it, but just trying to follow what I think would be musical and would be melodic or rhythmically interesting at that particular moment in time. Trying to follow that, and of course, then there are certain solos where for one reason or another you kind of have to play them as they are on the record. Tell Me How It Feels, for example. I guess that was the first track of Cardinal Blacks that kind of blew up, and people love that specific solo, so I tend not to deviate from that too much live. There are other solos then, like Warm Love, mentioned earlier, which is a little bit more extended. It's a little bit more kind of, an undefined start, middle, and end, really, and kind of take it wherever I want to go, which is more fun to me, at least live, because that just gives me this kind of broad palette of, well, take it wherever you want to go. And then it's just a case of literally trying to follow whatever I think would be interesting. Like I said, whether that's the two main factors tend to be rhythmically interesting and melodically interesting. So there's a lot of repetition in my playing in terms of taking a motif and trying to develop that. And whether that's octaves apart or whether it's, kind of developing that in a harmonic sense, kind of, different harmony or whatever. That's what I'm thinking about. It's not, I don't know. Like I said, it's a hard one to answer because there's not a particular yes or no or kind of definite response to that, so much as just trying to think of something which works within the context of the track.
Yeah, and I think one thing you left out that I see when you solo is you do play to support the song.
Oh, thank you.
Always. So
yeah, it's again come from having grown up listening to bands and listening to musicians who do serve the song. They're guitarists in bands as opposed to guitarists that are there for the sake of being a guitarist, I guess.
So we've only got a couple more minutes, and the number one thing we got the most questions about, both on your social media and on our posts and our DMs, was people are asking, would you ever do a guitar with Yamaha, like a signature something?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of that echoes a lot of questions that I get across social media and YouTube all the time. Absolutely, I think it's kind of it's nice to be associated with the RevStar at this point. Obviously the custom shop model that you guys made me back in 2020 is my main guitar. There's no getting around that. It's a guitar that I play all the time. On the record, it's on every track. It's pretty much on every track that we play live. So it's nice to be associated with that. And I guess at this point in time as well, with the new iteration of the RevStar having been released, its appointments or its kind of its setup is very fairly unique, I guess, in terms of having the wrap over and having the two P90s. There's not anything in the current lineup which kind of echoes that. So honestly, I'd love to do it. It's something I get a lot of questions about. So I think it would be very cool to see that come to fruition at some point. And it's not something that I set out to do at any point. It was something that if it happens, great. And I always want it to feel like a natural thing. You see a lot of musicians who end up with signature models with various companies where, okay, they're very cool guitars, but you're kind of left thinking, where the hell did that come from? I've never seen him play that brand of guitar. And then that, at least for me, whether that's looking at it from the kind of inside view, I guess, of being in the industry and knowing how these things tend to work. But it always leaves me scratching my head in terms of thinking, well, just some money's changed hands. That's a kind of relationship of convenience as much as anything else. But I've always thought that if I do have a signature anything, whether it's pickups, whether it's a guitar, whether it's an amp, it needs to have a continuity. It needs to have a kind of genuine connection and relationship and evolution of that relationship, which is documented, and for me, that's been playing that guitar since, pretty much the very conception of Cardinal Black. A lot of the material was written on that guitar and will no doubt continue to be playing live on that guitar. So if it does happen, I'm all over it.
Great. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up. There's a lot of questions that we don't have time to get to. I know Chris has lots of free time. Maybe he can hop on and answer some of those that are the easy ones to answer.
When my voice comes back, yeah.
Yeah. So Chris, I want to thank you for making the time to do this live stream. And
absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for all the support with Yamaha and everything you do with and for us. And let's sign off and let's talk about a signature guitar right now.
Awesome. Take care, guys. Thank you very much for watching.